Thank you, Mark.
This is Les, by the way, for those who don't know Les.
Hi.
Yeah, give him a welcome. Now, you've had a bit of a history with, well, BCS, but Baptist Care now. You've also had a bit of a history at Menai Baptist Church. How long have you been involved here?
I think Pat and I moved here from Peakhurst in 1996,
Okay.
20-odd years ago.
Yeah.
I've been involved in the church ever since. We transferred our membership from Mortdale Baptist and got involved straight away.
Fantastic. That's a bit of a longer history than maybe some of us might have been aware. Now, just to help us understand you and I guess thinking a little bit about pursuing God this morning, what's your spiritual background? How and when did you come to faith?
A long time ago. I think I was 12 years old, maybe 13, when I first made at the time, a serious commitment to Christ. I was brought up in a Christian home. My parents, Christians, and we were involved in church, Sunday school, Christian endeavour, missionary groups, ever since I was so high. But it was in Sunday school, actually, that, I'm going to say the pressure was put on. That's not quite right. Where open opportunity was given to make a personal commitment. Yeah. And that was actually due, I think, to one particular Sunday school teacher, the gentleman who taught the senior boys class in Sunday school at the time. And I think he had the aim that no boy would go through his class without really understanding they needed to make a personal commitment. And it was under his leadership and guidance and help that I made that first commitment. I didn't realise at the time that man would become my father-in-law in later years, but Norm Naylor will know who I'm talking about, Jack Partridge. He was a real evangelist, and he was so keen to see the young people at that age to make a personal commitment, and I was one of those. Since then, of course, I've reaffirmed that commitment probably several times, and it's ongoing.
Yeah, fantastic. And I mean, what a fantastic story, even for that, for John, was it? John Partridge? Jack Partridge. Yeah. I mean, he would have no idea of, in some ways at that point, of the future that you would have had and the impact you could have had. And so I take great encouragement, I'm sure all of you do as well, of seeing these little ones here and we prayed for them, the kids out there. We think maybe of Baptist Care and maybe we think of retirement villages and other things like that. That's some of the imagery of where they're involved at the moment, but its history is much deeper and broader than that, and even that is bound up even in your own story there as well as part of that. So tell us a little bit, what was your involvement at Baptist Care?
Initially, mainly, purely financial. Going way back in the 1970s, I think 71, 72, I had a job in a company, a very large company, senior financial officer, reasonably well paid, company car, all the benefits, all that sort of stuff. And I can recall seeing, I think it might have been in the Australian Baptist, the newspaper that the Baptists put out at the time, an advertisement for the New South Wales Baptist Homes Trust for an accountant. And I thought, oh yeah. I knew a bit about the Homes Trust. I knew they'd build buildings for aged people, all that sort of stuff, but I just passed over the ad. But it was one of those nagging things.
I like how you saw basic.
One of those nagging things, No bells rang, no lights flashed. So this is for you. No, it wasn't. It just kept nagging away. And I can remember one of our pastors, and again, normal now, the Reverend Basil Brown, he used to talk to us as young people about following God's leadership. God will lead you. Commit your life to him and he will lead you. He'll show you where to go. But there were no lights flashing, no bells ringing. But he used to say, always remember that the rudder on a ship is of no use unless the ship is moving. So he said, when you are faced with options, think about it and look at the one that perhaps you think is the most appropriate and start to move in that direction. If it's the wrong one, the rudder will turn and you will go somewhere else. So I thought of that and I started to inquire about this position. We had a chat to a couple of people and, it just started to grow. Yeah. And the rudder didn't turn. It kept me going straight. And ultimately I I joined the Homes Trust as accountant. And I think for a particular reason, the trust at that stage was growing dramatically, mainly through huge amounts of government funding becoming available to build or to help build places and so on. And I think my calling there, if I can use that word, was to set up some sort of proper accounting mechanism. Because when I first went there and asked a lady who was she actually was a retired accountant, public accountant, but she was doing the role of a bookkeeper. I said, well, show me what you've got. And she pulled out one book, a big book like this, and opened it up, and there's a million columns in it with all little handwritten numbers. She said, well, that's what I do.
Yeah.
Okay. So I could see that there needed to be some change there and a proper accounting system set up which would not only record what's happening, but what was happening, of course, with government funding in millions of dollars, there was an increasing need for accountability to the government and to donors. So that all had to be taken into account. So I saw it as my role, and I did that over the next 2 or 3 years. And I think at that stage, God was saying, well, you've done what I called you here to do. You can go and do your own thing now. So I went back into other businesses for a while. But then 6 or 7 years later, would you believe, a similar ad appeared in the Australian Baptist. What's going on here? It turns out that the fellow who had taken over from me was retiring.
Okay.
And I think God was saying to me, well, you should go and talk to them again.
Sure.
Which I did. And anyway, to cut a long story short, I rejoined the Homes Trust and stayed there until retirement. And during that time, I was the whole thing had grown dramatically since my previous employment there. And I was a senior financial officer, but eventually became CEO. And for the last 10 or 11 years, I think, of my working life there, I was the chief executive officer. And being in that role, of course, there were I could see other changes that needed to be made, not just in the financial area. They'd been made. That was working well. But now I had the opportunity to at least have some influence on the board now to make some other changes. And of course, there was a name change. You saw on the clip here, there was a board, I think, of 36 people. 36 people on a board. That is totally unworkable. It was then and it would be now. I eventually convinced the board through the chairman, and that's another story, that the maximum number of maybe 12 board members would be appropriate. And eventually that happened, and that was a major change. The other major change, I think, too, is because of that huge board of 36 people, they were the board of directors. They didn't realise that. They were called a council, actually.
Sure.
But they had all the responsibilities of directors of a company.
Sure. And
they didn't realise it. But anyway, apart from the name change and the reduction in number, there was also a number of other changes. One was a change in the sort of attitude towards control of the organisation, because at that stage, the people who had started it, some of them were still around, and there was this sense of ownership and a sense that they were still managing the organisation, which had grown to, at that stage, something like over 1,000 employees, I think, even then. So we had to sort of change the whole attitude towards what the board responsibility was, what management all these things had to change.
Sure.
And that was quite a pressure time. So I guess my time at the trust and the 2 bites I had was sort of an agent of change.
Sure.
I think that's why God put me there. And a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
But I think we had some success. And of course, as you saw today, employee-wise, I think there's 3,600 and something employees on the payroll. I think when I retired 20-something years ago, I think there were about 1,400 to 1,500. So it's more than doubled in that time. And we've just received the annual report for 2019. And you look at the turnover, we're talking money-wise of, I think it's $280 million going through the books in terms of money. So it's a big organisation, and God has blessed that over so many years. And the number of people who are being helped and transformed through being shown the love of Christ is something like 1,000 to 1,200 people. So,
and a fantastic story of just, you know, they talked about right at the top of that video of just a few people who said, you know what, we can operate in a space here that there's a need. And that started with kids and then became prisoners and then moved from one thing to another. Yeah. To think that that's where it started, just something very small, and God grew it into where it is now. There's
no doubt, right from the word go, the aim was to express the love of Christ through all that was done. And that's remained right down through the 75 years. And again, it's come out in the video, of course. And today they use the little catchphrase, because we care. Yeah. Because we care. I think that's very important.
Fantastic. And a storied 75 years, obviously.
I wasn't there in the beginning.
Great to hear about how God was deeply involved, and your hunger and your pursuit of Him and listening is part of the pursuit of God, and potentially, even you said you skimmed over the advert, potentially even part of it is going in a place where that may not necessarily be your first preference, or for making some of those hard choices of going, this is where God's leading me and that's what God's calling me towards. So thanks for sharing. I just thought it'd be interesting and helpful and good for us this morning just to also ask you, 75 years are done now for that organisation. MBC's got their own history. You're 89 now. When you think about the next season, next 75 years, the next season for this church, what sort of things do you dream and imagine about for the next generation? A loaded and big question, but just to give you an opportunity just to share, where's your heart at with that?
And that's a pretty big question, Mark. I can remember, pardon me, my parents used to talk about the good old days, their good old days. I can even talk now about the good old days, and things have changed over the years. And, people's attitude, the community attitude toward the church, for example, it's different. The church is irrelevant in the view of most people in the community. Now, I guess I could say, well, I would like to see it totally change. I don't think it's going to. I think my wish for the future is that the church, as we know the church, both locally and combined together, needs to be true to its calling, which I guess is twofold. I mean, we're instructed in Scripture to go and make disciples. That means facing people with a confronting message, a real challenge, and giving the option of deciding this way or that way. That's what it's all about. But at the same time, demonstrating the love of Christ through practical programs and issues and things. So I think the church needs to be always careful. It's true to the calling that God has given to it in those two avenues. And sometimes I think we lose emphasis on one and it swings to the other, and then maybe it swings back again, but we need to keep them going both together. And for the sake of our kids for the future, when I think of myself, a commitment to 12 years of age, and that's the age when, or in that early teenage years, when most people would make that commitment, a decision. And so I think we need to be true to our calling of presenting the gospel, but doing it in a way that we can show the love of Christ in whatever the programs are.